Imagine this on your 26th birthday. Instead of a cake, hugs, or even a simple happy birthday, your parents hand you a bill for $2,850 and later steal it straight out of your bank account. Shocking, right? If you've ever lived through betrayal like this, or witnessed a family tearing someone down instead of lifting them up, drop a comment below. You're watching this story from the beginning, stay with me, because it only gets more unbelievable. On her 26th birthday, Rachel Morgan woke up with a quiet sense of hope. She wasn't expecting anything extravagant, no surprise vacations or expensive gifts, but she wished, deep down, for something simple. A dinner with her family. A slice of cake, even a card with her name written in her mother's handwriting would have been enough. She dressed carefully that morning, pulled her long brown hair back into a neat ponytail, and tried to convince herself that maybe this year would be different. Living in Austin, Texas, Rachel had built a modest life for herself. She worked in tech, kept a tidy apartment, and budgeted carefully. She wasn't flashy, but she was steady, reliable, the kind of daughter who always showed up. By evening, her phone hadn't buzzed once with a plan. Still, she held on to the hope that maybe her family was keeping something secret, waiting to surprise her. She reheated leftovers from the night before, set them aside, and kept her shoes by the door just in case. But then her cousin's Instagram story lit up her screen. Rachel tapped it open, her breath catching in her throat. There they were, her entire family. Her parents, Linda and Charles, smiling like they didn't have a care in the world. Her older brother Ryan, his arm raised in a toast. Balloons tied to chairs, plates stacked high with food, a cake glittering with sparklers. And in bold frosting letters across the cake, "Congratulations, Ryan." It wasn't Rachel's birthday dinner. It was a party for her brother's promotion. On her night, her moment, the one day a year she asked to be seen, Rachel sat frozen, the blue glow of her phone screen cutting across the dark living room. The only sound was the hum of her fridge, the only company a plastic container of cold rice in her lap. She replayed the video once, twice, a third time. Each replay felt like a punch in the stomach. Her parents weren't too tired, as they'd claimed. They hadn't forgotten. They had chosen. Growing up, Rachel had always been pushed into the background. Ryan was the star, the pride of the family. He got the new clothes, the car at 18, the endless praise. When Rachel graduated college, her parents congratulated Ryan for being such a supportive brother. When Rachel landed her first job, they joked about how Ryan had been her motivation. It had been years of small cuts, quiet dismissals, the constant reminder that she was there to support, never to shine. But this night it was different. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't quiet. It was deliberate, and it broke something deep inside her. Rachel didn't call. She didn't text. She didn't even leave a comment on the photos that flooded social media as the night went on. Instead, she sat in the silence, staring at the wall, her heart beating like a drum in an empty room. By the time the sparklers on Ryan's cake had burned down, Rachel had made her decision. She wouldn't beg to be included anymore. The silence stretched into the night, heavy and suffocating, until she finally fell asleep on the couch, phone face down on the coffee table. But the silence didn't last. The next morning, Rachel's phone buzzed with a new message. She rubbed her tired eyes, reached for it, and read the words twice, her stomach twisting tighter with every line. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a belated, happy birthday. It was a demand. "Rachel, we need $2,850 for the mortgage. Send it today." No mention of the night before, no acknowledgement of the hurt they had caused, just numbers, just obligation. Rachel stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the screen. After everything, after the party, after years of being overlooked, was she really nothing more than their safety net? She sat back, her pulse racing, the memory of that glowing cake still burned into her mind. And then, like a spark in dry grass, one thought took hold. If they could ignore her birthday so easily, what else were they willing to ignore? The message on Rachel's phone glared back at her like an insult carved in stone. "We need $2,850 for the mortgage. Send it today. I don't stay grading to the Cape Dentim." She read it 3 times, hoping she'd miss something, maybe a stray happy birthday at the end, or even a half-hearted emoji. just the number, the urgency, and the assumption. Rachel's chest tightened as she set the phone down on the table. Her birthday had been reduced to a line item in her parents' financial panic. It wasn't the first time. Over the years, she had been the one who covered the electric bill when her dad forgot. She had chipped in for car repairs that somehow became permanent debts. She had even worked double shifts to make sure the family didn't lose their house when Ryan was busy spending money on new gadgets and out-of-state trips. And every time, she told herself she was doing it out of love, out of family loyalty, out of hope that one day, they'd see her for more than a walking checkbook. But last night had made something crystal clear: they never would. Rachel's phone buzzed again. This time it was her father. The voicemail came in heavy with disappointment, as if she were already guilty of something. "Rachel, listen. Family is about sacrifice. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Your mother and I raised you better than this. Ryan has a bright future, don't drag him down by being difficult." Her fingers trembled as she replayed the words. Don't drag him down. As if her refusal to hand over nearly $3,000 would be the thing to topple Ryan's shining career. Rachel almost laughed. It was bitter, sharp, and it caught in her throat. Her father wasn't even asking, he was commanding, guilt-tripping, twisting the knife of obligation deeper. By the afternoon, her phone was a battlefield of messages. Ryan finally called, his tone dripping with arrogance. "You're seriously overreacting," he scoffed before she could even respond. "They didn't mean anything by it. Besides, my promotion is huge for this family. Don't make everything about you. Just send the money, it's not like you can't cover it. That's what you're there for." The words landed like a slap. That's what you're there for. She hung up without saying goodbye, her hand shaking so violently she nearly dropped the phone. Was that all she was to them? A safety net? A lifeline they could tug whenever their world started to unravel? That evening, Rachel's aunt, Karen, chimed in with her own brand of guilt. "Rachel, your parents are older now. You need to step up. Stop being so stubborn. Think of Ryan, he has a future to protect. Money problems can't drag him down right now." Rachel pressed the phone to her chest and closed her eyes. Protect his future. What about hers? What about the years she had worked 2 jobs? The mornings she'd gone to work with bloodshot eyes. The endless nights she'd budgeted so carefully while Ryan burned through cash without a care. The manipulation was so blatant it almost felt absurd. And yet, it was the same script she had heard her whole life. Ryan first, Rachel last. That night, sitting alone at her kitchen table with a stack of unpaid bills, Rachel felt the ground shift beneath her. Their words no longer made her feel guilty, they made her furious. Her silence, which once felt like weakness, began to feel like power. For the first time, she realized she didn't have to pick up the phone. She didn't have to reply. She didn't have to carry them anymore. She stared at her phone, at the flood of notifications piling up, and then she turned it face down, letting the buzz fade into nothing. Rachel thought about the message that had started it all. Not a greeting, not an apology, just a number. 2850. Her parents had drawn the line, but they didn't realize they'd also awakened something in her. The envelope was small, thin, and tucked into Rachel's mailbox like an afterthought. At first glance, she assumed it was junk mail, another credit card offer. But when she saw her mother's handwriting on the front, her stomach tightened. Maybe, she thought, it was an apology. A card, a note to soften the blow of the birthday they had erased. Her hands shook as she tore it open. Inside wasn't a letter. It was a bank withdrawal slip. $2,850. The exact amount they had demanded the week before. The account number printed across the top wasn't theirs. It was hers. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. She dropped into a chair, staring at the paper until the numbers blurred. She hadn't authorized anything. She pulled out her phone, opened her Chase app, and there it was in black and white. The money was gone. Her pulse hammered as she scrolled through the transaction details. It hadn't been an online transfer. It was an in-person withdrawal at a branch just a few miles from her parents' house. The truth hit like a freight train. They hadn't just begged. They hadn't just guilt-tripped. They had taken. Rachel's mind raced back to the time she'd walked into her apartment and noticed something slightly off, mail stacked differently, a drawer left open. She had brushed it off, telling herself she was being paranoid. Now she knew. They had the spare key. They had gone through her things. Her parents hadn't just excluded her from her own birthday, they had invaded her home, they had stolen from her. Her phone lit up again. This time, it was her mother calling. Against her better judgment, Rachel answered. "Sweetheart," Linda's voice was almost cheerful. "Don't worry about the mortgage anymore. We handled it. Everything is fine now. On that no is no many wasters for makend intenders in the taste." Rachel gripped the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. "You handled it with my money." There was a pause. Then a sigh. The kind that always came before a lecture. "It's all the same, Rachel. You know we needed it. Family shares. You'll earn it back. But if the house was gone, where would Ryan stay when he comes home from his business trips? Where would we all gather? You wouldn't want that on your conscience, would you?" The calmness in her mother's voice was more cutting than a scream. They didn't see it as theft. They saw it as entitlement. Rachel hung up without another word, her heart pounding in her ears. That night, she sat at her kitchen table with the withdrawal slip in front of her. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Her parents' words echoed in her head. "It's all the same. Family shares. You wouldn't want that on your conscience." For the first time in her life, Rachel felt a cold clarity settle over her. She wasn't their daughter in their eyes. She was a resource, a backup plan, an ATM with a pulse. Slowly, she stood, walked to the drawer where she kept the spare keys her parents had demanded years ago, and pulled them out. She turned the cool metal over in her palm, then slid them into an envelope. The next morning, she dropped it in their mailbox without a note. A silent message. The lock they thought they had on her life was gone. But even as she walked away, she knew this wasn't over. In the weeks that followed, Rachel struggled to keep up with the hole their theft had blown in her budget. Bills piled up faster than she could pay them. Her landlord sent a firm reminder about rent. Even putting gas in her car felt like a defeat. One evening, she opened her fridge and stared at the near-empty shelves. A half carton of milk, a few eggs, and a takeout box of rice. She sank into a chair, the withdrawal slip still tucked in her drawer like a wound that wouldn't close. All those years, she had made sure her parents' table was full, and here she was scraping by on scraps. That night, as she picked at her cold dinner, a thought began to form. Not loud, not angry, just quiet, steady, and sharp. If she kept playing this role, nothing would ever change. For days after the theft, Rachel lived in a fog. The numbers in her bank account mocked her each time she logged in, the absence of that $2,850 like a wound that wouldn't heal. Rent was looming. Gas for her car suddenly felt like a luxury. She had always been proud of standing on her own 2 feet. But now, thanks to her own parents, she was teetering on the edge of collapse. One night, she came home late, kicked off her shoes and opened her fridge. Inside, a half carton of milk, 3 eggs and a container of leftover rice. She leaned against the doorframe, staring at the emptiness, her throat tight. For years, she had made sure her parents' table was full, their bills paid, their comfort secured. And here she was reduced to scraps. Rachel sat at her small kitchen table, the hum of the old ceiling fan filling the silence. She thought of her mother's words still echoing. "Family shares, you'll earn it back." Her fists clenched. They weren't words of love. They were words of ownership. That night, something shifted. It wasn't an explosion of anger. It was quieter, heavier, like a rope finally snapping after being pulled too tight. For the first time, Rachel realized she didn't have to keep being the family's safety net. She didn't have to answer every call or bend to every demand. The next morning, she walked into her office at the tech firm where she worked and saw the place with new eyes. Up until then, her job had been just a paycheck, something to survive on while keeping her parents afloat. But what if she leaned in? What if she invested the energy she'd wasted on saving them into saving herself? So she did. Rachel started volunteering for projects nobody wanted. She stayed late, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She spoke up in meetings, her ideas sharper than she realized. At first, her coworkers looked at her like she'd grown a second head. But slowly, something shifted. Her manager started noticing. Colleagues who had once overlooked her began asking her opinion. For the first time in her life, Rachel wasn't just dependable, she was visible. Outside of work, she picked up side gigs, freelance web design, tutoring high school students in coding, even small tech support jobs. Every extra dollar went straight into rebuilding the cushion her parents had stolen. It was exhausting, late nights blurred into early mornings, but it felt different now. Each deposit into her savings wasn't a lifeline for them, it was freedom for her. 3 months after her birthday, her boss pulled her aside. "Rachel," he said, "I've been impressed. We've got a new project lead role opening up. I think you'd be perfect for it." She blinked, stunned. For so long, she had been invisible. The afterthought. Now, she was being recognized for her own work, her own worth. That night, she opened her email to find an official offer letter waiting. The salary was higher than she had ever imagined. It wasn't millions, but it was enough to breathe again. Enough to finally feel secure. Meanwhile, her side business began to take off. A website she designed for a local shop caught the attention of other small businesses. Word spread. Soon, she had more clients than she could handle alone. Rachel's world, which had once felt so suffocating, began to expand. She could feel her life becoming her own, piece by piece. But even as she rebuilt, her family didn't notice. To them, she was still the backup plan, the safety net. They called occasionally, always with thinly veiled requests. "The car's acting up again," her father would sigh. "Your brother's planning another trip, could you spot him a little extra?" Her mother left voicemails about urgent needs. Rachel listened, but she didn't bite. Not anymore. She had found her footing, she had found her strength. And then, one evening, while cleaning out her desk, she stumbled upon an old folder stuffed with family documents, things her parents had once asked her to keep safe. At first, it looked like junk. Old insurance statements, utility bills, outdated papers, but buried inside was something that made her pulse quicken. Mortgage statements, tax forms, and loan applications. And there, in neat black ink, was her name. Her income, her savings, listed as family assets. The folder was heavier than it looked, stuffed with years of family paperwork her parents had once begged her to hold on to. At the time, she hadn't questioned it. Rachel had been the responsible one, the one who kept records neat, bills paid, details remembered. But now, sitting at her small kitchen table in Austin, she flipped through the yellowing pages with a knot in her chest. Old insurance statements, warranty slips for appliances she didn't own, utility bills from over a decade ago. She was ready to toss the whole stack when a different document slid loose, a mortgage statement with her parents' names printed at the top. That wasn't surprising. What stopped her cold were the numbers written underneath. Her income, her savings. Right there, listed in neat black type as part of their family assets. Rachel's breath hitched. She dug deeper, pulling out tax forms, loan applications, stacks of papers they'd clearly submitted to banks over the years. And there, again and again, her name appeared. Rachel Morgan, annual income $74,000, savings $15,000. Her chest burned as she scanned the pages. They hadn't just used her once. They had built their entire financial stability on her back. Rachel pushed the papers away and pressed her palms against her eyes, fighting the rising tide of nausea. It wasn't just the money they had stolen. It wasn't even just the key they had used to invade her apartment. It was this casual way of claiming her life as their property, scribbling her worth into their paperwork like she was a piece of furniture they owned. Her phone buzzed on the table. A voicemail. She didn't need to listen to know who it was. When she finally pressed play, her mother's voice filled the room, shaky but rehearsed. "Rachel, honey, I don't know why you're being so cold. We're your parents. We're supposed to share everything. You wouldn't want us to lose the house, would you? Think of Ryan, this home is his base when he travels. Don't let your pride ruin things for all of us." The words echoed like poison in her ear. Think of Ryan, always Ryan, never her. Rachel stood, pacing the small living room, the folder still open on the table. She thought of the years she had sacrificed, double shifts, careful budgets, the constant humiliation of being invisible while her brother was celebrated. She thought of the night she had stared at her fridge, nearly empty, while her parents laughed over steak dinners with Ryan. And now this proof that she wasn't a daughter in their eyes. She was leverage. Her heart pounded as she picked up one of the loan applications, her name staring back at her from the guarantor section. Her parents hadn't even asked permission. They hadn't needed to. In their minds, it was their right. Rachel sat back down, pulling the papers into a neat stack. Her hands stopped shaking. Something inside her had solidified. They had shown her exactly who they were, and she finally knew what she needed to do. The next day, Rachel made copies of every document and placed them in a folder of her own. She organized them carefully: mortgage statements, tax returns, loan applications, every piece of evidence that tied her to debts she had never agreed to. As she slid the last page into place, she felt a strange calm wash over her. For the first time, she wasn't scrambling to fix things. She wasn't trying to earn love that would never come. She was preparing. Her silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was strategy. And as she looked at the folder in her hands, she understood something her parents never had. Knowledge was power. Rachel leaned back in her chair, staring at the stack of evidence that exposed the entire house of cards her family had built. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from her father. "The bank keeps calling. We can't keep stalling forever. Rachel, step up before it's too late." She didn't reply. Instead, she slid the folder into her work bag. It was time to stop being their safety net. It was time to let the truth do the work. The Chase Bank branch sat on the corner of South Lamar Boulevard, its glass doors glinting in the Texas Sunday. Rachel paused outside, clutching the folder of documents to her chest. Her palms were damp, her stomach knotted. For years, she had walked into banks only to bail her parents out. Today, she was walking in to expose them. Inside, the air was cool, humming with fluorescent lights. A loan officer in a crisp navy suit greeted her with a practiced smile. "How can I help you today?" Rachel's voice was steady, though her heart raced. "I need to talk about fraudulent use of my information on loan applications." That got his attention. Within minutes, she was seated across a desk, the folder open between them. She laid out the papers one by one. Mortgage statements with her name listed as family assets. Loan applications with her salary inflated to make her parents look solvent. Tax filings that wove her into debts she'd never agreed to. The officer's brow furrowed deeper with each page. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "Miss Morgan, this is serious. If what you're saying is correct, your parents have been misrepresenting your finances for years. That's fraud." "In this top is." The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Rachel swallowed. She hadn't wanted to believe it, hadn't wanted to put such a word to her parents' faces, but here it was. Fraud. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice quieter. The officer tapped his pen against the desk. "We'll need you to file a formal dispute. Once that's done, an investigation will be opened. Their lines of credit will be frozen during the process. If the fraud is confirmed, foreclosure proceedings could move quickly. Instead, in a time, it's there is a level something botter vleng." Rachel nodded, her pulse thudding in her ears. "Do it." He slid the forms across the desk. With each signature, Rachel felt something inside her loosen like chains falling away one by one. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was fighting back, and she was doing it the right way. When she stepped back out into the hot Austin afternoon, the sunlight felt different. For the first time in years, she wasn't weighed down by their demands. She was holding the truth like a weapon, and it was sharper than any argument she could have had with them. That evening, the phone calls began again. Her father's voice, sharp and angry. "Why aren't you answering? The bank keeps calling. Do you want us to lose the house?" Her mother, switching tactics. "Rachel, sweetheart, you're blowing this out of proportion. Families share. We didn't mean any harm. Always forgiveness." And Ryan, predictably arrogant. "You think you're hurting them. But you're hurting yourself too. If they lose the house, where are we supposed to go? You think you'll look good when people find out you turned on your own family?" Rachel let the calls go to voicemail. She didn't need to defend herself anymore. The evidence was already in motion, working silently behind the scenes. Days turned into a week. The tone of the voicemails shifted from angry to desperate, from guilt-tripping to pleading. Aunt Karen even chimed in late one night. "Rachel, do you really want your parents out on the street? You'll regret this if you let it happen." Rachel stared at the message before typing 3 words. Not my problem. She hit send and turned off her phone. In the silence that followed, Rachel felt something she hadn't felt in years. Control. The family that had once dictated her every move was now scrambling, their illusion of stability cracking apart. And she hadn't screamed, hadn't begged, hadn't lifted a finger beyond telling the truth. But the real storm hadn't hit yet. One morning, as Rachel sipped her coffee before work, her cousin posted a story on Instagram. It was a photo of her parents' house, the once pristine lawn now overgrown, and in the middle of the yard, a bright red and white foreclosure sign staked into the ground. Rachel's phone buzzed a second later with a text from Ryan. "What did you do?" The photo spread across Rachel's phone screen like a final verdict. Her parents' home, the one they had boasted about for decades, the pride of the Morgan family, stood behind an unforgiving foreclosure sign. The grass was knee-high, the shutters peeling, the once manicured lawn now a symbol of ruin. Her cousin had posted it with no caption, just the image because sometimes pictures speak louder than words. Seconds later came Ryan's text. "What did you do?" Rachel set her coffee cup down, staring at the message. For once, she didn't feel panic. She didn't feel guilt. She felt a steady calm. It wasn't what she had done, it was what they had done to themselves. By afternoon, the calls started flooding in. Her father's voice was raw with rage. "Rachel, you think this is funny? You think destroying your own family makes you strong? You've ruined us." Her mother's message followed minutes later, her tone cracking between sobs. "Sweetheart, please. Don't let them take our home. We can fix this. We're family. You don't turn your back on family." Rachel let the messages pile up unread. The weight of their manipulation, the endless chorus of guilt, slid off her like rain on glass. But then came the pounding on her apartment door. Rachel froze, phone in hand, as the voices rose in the hallway. "Open this door, Rachel," her father thundered. "You can't ignore us forever." Baby, please." Her mother's voice followed, higher, trembling. "We just need to talk. We'll work it out, like we always do." Rachel approached slowly, heart hammering, but she didn't unlock it. Through the peephole, she saw them, her father red-faced, fists balled, her mother clutching her purse like it was life itself. They looked smaller somehow, desperate, frantic. The authority they had once wielded over her had evaporated. She stood in silence, letting them yell, letting them plead. Finally, she bent down, slid a plain envelope under the door, and stepped back. The shouting stopped. Her father bent to pick it up, tearing it open. Inside lay a single item, the spare key they had once demanded she hand over just in case. The same key they had used to ransack her apartment, to steal from her account, to justify every invasion as their right. Now it was theirs again, but stripped of power. Through the peephole, Rachel saw their faces falter. Her father's anger drained into something hollow. Her mother pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes wet. No words passed between them, no apologies, no confessions, just silence. And then, slowly, they turned and walked away. Rachel leaned her forehead against the door, her breath shaking out of her chest. Not from fear, but from release. For the first time, she realized she wasn't trapped in their orbit anymore. She didn't have to answer, didn't have to save, didn't have to play the part they had written for her. The house on Oak Ridge Drive, the one they had built their entire identity on, was gone. And with it, their control over her. In the days that followed, Rachel drove past once. Just once. The lawn was overrun, the blinds drawn, the foreclosure sign weathered from rain. For a fleeting moment, she remembered childhood birthdays in that yard, barbecues on warm summer nights, the smell of her mother's pot roast filling the kitchen. But memory collided with reality. The same house had become the stage for her invisibility, her dismissal, her exploitation. Now, it was nothing but wood, brick, and broken promises. That night, her phone buzzed again. A single message from her mother. "Rachel, we have nowhere to go." Rachel sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the screen. She could almost hear her mother's voice, laced with expectation, as if this single sentence would pull her back in, as if guilt would flood her veins and undo everything. But instead, she locked the phone, set it face down on the nightstand, and lay back in the dark. The hum of the city outside her window filled the silence. For once, the silence wasn't suffocating. It was freedom. The message lingered on Rachel's phone like a ghost. "Rachel, we have nowhere to go." For years, those words would have ripped her apart. They would have sent her racing to her parents' side, wallet in hand, ready to sacrifice herself once again. But not this time. This time, Rachel felt something different, a stillness, a quiet certainty that their problems were no longer hers to solve. She picked up her keys and drove. The highway stretched wide beneath the Texas sky, the radio humming softly in the background. Her hands rested lightly on the wheel, her chest unburdened for the first time in decades. When she pulled onto Oak Ridge Drive, the sight of the house nearly stopped her breath. The shutters hung crooked, the lawn choked with weeds. The bright red foreclosure sign tilted forward, beaten by the wind and rain. Rachel parked across the street and sat for a moment, memories washing over her. Birthdays where Ryan got the spotlight. Graduations where her achievements were dismissed. Dinners where her laughter was drowned out by everyone else's pride in him. That house had never been her home, it had been a stage. A place where she played the part of the dependable daughter, the invisible one, the provider. And now, that stage was empty. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She simply sat, watching as the past decayed in front of her, until she realized she was free to leave it behind. Her phone buzzed once more. A voicemail this time. Her father's voice. Raw. Defeated. "Rachel, you've ruined us. How could you betray your own family?" She let the message play, then deleted it without hesitation. Because betrayal wasn't hers to carry. The betrayal had been theirs on her 26th birthday, when they chose her brother's promotion over her, when they stole her savings, when they wrote her into debts she never agreed to. Rachel started the engine, the hum filling the car like a promise. She didn't need to look back at the house again. As she drove away, sunlight broke through the clouds, spilling gold across the road ahead. For once, the future didn't feel heavy with obligation. It felt wide open, waiting for her to claim. And in that quiet moment, Rachel whispered to herself the words that had once been her final reply to them. "Ask the ones you celebrate. I'm mating the cause de setterst." She smiled, pressed her foot to the gas, and disappeared down the road free at last.